Today, we're diving into 3 of the darkest cave disasters ever recorded. Stories that will stay with you long after the screen goes black. One man was sealed alive behind a wall of rock. A group of young divers sank deep and never came back. And in the final story, a school trip turned into a nightmare. These aren't just freak accidents, they're slow, suffocating descents into total darkness. No exits, no second chances. Just fear, silence, and the cold breath of the earth closing in. Stick around, because what you're about to hear is terrifying and proof that once you enter the cave decides if you leave. On the morning of September 6th, 2010, Eric Establi entered the Saint-Marcel d'Ardèche cave system in southern France. He had done this kind of dive many times before. Eric wasn't a thrill seeker. He wasn't reckless. He was a calm, smart, and highly trained cave diver, known for keeping a cool head in dangerous situations. He loved the silence of the underground. He loved the narrow tunnels, the cold water, and the feeling of going deeper than anyone else ever had. That day, Eric planned to dive into an unexplored section of the Ardèche Gorges, one of the most dangerous and beautiful underwater cave systems in France. It's a place filled with winding, water-filled tunnels, long silences, and total darkness. No light reaches those parts of the earth. No sound either, just water, rock, and your own breathing. Eric dove in alone. He had done this before. He carried enough air. He followed a guideline, the thin rope divers use to find their way back. Everything was going fine, until it wasn't. As Eric moved deeper, a rockfall happened behind him. A section of the tunnel collapsed. The path he had come through was now blocked by heavy debris and jagged stone. Eric was trapped. There was no way to turn back, and he was 780 meters from the entrance. No one saw it happen. No one heard it. Above ground, everything was quiet. It wasn't until Eric failed to return that people began to worry. Hours passed. Then an entire day. The alarm was raised. Rescuers were called. The French speleological rescue team arrived quickly. These were some of the best cave divers in Europe, but even they were shocked by what they found. The tunnel Eric had entered was extremely narrow, too narrow for most divers. The rockfall had made it even worse. Thick slabs of stone now blocked the only way to reach him, and the tunnel had sharp turns, tight squeezes, and strong water currents. Still, they tried. They dove in over and over, pushing deeper each time. Some of them scraped their gear on the jagged walls. Others had to exhale all their air just to squeeze through tiny gaps. The deeper they went, the more dangerous it became. Days passed. The team was exhausted, but they refused to stop. They set up communication systems underground. They used cameras, cables, and voice lines. They hoped Eric might still be alive, waiting behind the rockfall, but there was no sound, no movement, nothing. By day 6, hope was starting to fade, but still they kept going. They wanted to bring him back, dead or alive. On day 8, they finally broke through. One of the divers reached the chamber beyond the collapse, and there, in the cold, dark water, he found Eric. He had died alone, trapped far beneath the surface. There was no sign of panic, no wild movement, just stillness. It was likely that Eric had conserved his air as long as he could. He had waited quietly, knowing rescue might come, but it came too late. The team brought his body back, slowly, carefully. They didn't want to leave him down there. He had gone deeper than almost anyone ever had, and now he was gone. After the recovery, France mourned. Eric had not been a celebrity, but in the caving world, he was respected. His death wasn't caused by carelessness. It was just a terrible accident, a natural disaster inside a place where few people ever go. But his story didn't disappear. In fact, it changed how cave diving was done in France. It made teams rethink how they explore tight spaces. It reminded everyone that even the best divers in the world are powerless in the face of falling rock and deep earth pressure. What made it so brutal wasn't just the fact that he died. It was how he died. Alone, in silence, in total darkness, trapped, hundreds of meters underground. There was no room to stand, no way to turn around, no sunlight, no warmth, no sound except his own breath. And in the end, not even that. He didn't panic. He didn't scream. He simply waited and died. He died alone in total darkness, deep beneath the earth. While Eric's final breath was taken alone in total darkness, he wasn't the only one swallowed by the depths. This next story proves that even when you're not alone, the cave can still win. On May 28, 1973, 4 young men from Australia set out for a day of adventure they would never forget. Their names were Stephen Murphy, Gordon Roberts, Christopher Brown, and Neil Williams, 4 experienced divers ready to explore the infamous shaft cave system near Mount Gambier, South Australia. The sun was shining that morning, the wind was light, everything felt perfect. They laughed together, chatting excitedly as they prepared for the dive. The shaft, hidden in a quiet farming area, is well known for its stunning, crystal-clear waters. It's a cave system that draws divers from all over the world, but it's not a place for beginners. At over 40 meters deep, with tight, twisting tunnels and an eerie silence, it's as dangerous as it is beautiful. Despite the risks, these young men were experienced. They knew what they were doing. They had the right equipment. They were ready. They geared up, checking their tanks and ensuring everything was in order. As they plunged into the cold water, everything seemed peaceful. The water was clear, the cave was quiet, and they were surrounded by nothing but the deep, still world of the underground. For a while, all was calm. They descended into the darkness, moving deeper and deeper into the cave's twisting corridors. But what seemed like a simple exploration quickly turned into a deadly trap. The shaft is not a straightforward dive. It's a labyrinth of narrow passageways, deep chambers, and sharp turns. The further you go, the more disorienting it becomes. But at first, the 4 divers felt in control. They had their guide ropes to help them find their way back, and they felt safe, diving in pairs, knowing exactly where they were and how far they had gone. However, as the minutes passed, the further they ventured, the more dangerous it became. Then, something went wrong. They became disoriented. There's no one clear reason for why things went wrong, but divers often get lost in places like this. The tight passageways and dark waters play tricks on your mind. Nitrogen narcosis, a kind of underwater intoxication caused by breathing nitrogen at depth, affects every diver differently, and it's easy to lose focus. It slows your reactions. It clouds your judgment. The deeper you go, the more dangerous it becomes. The young men, despite their skill, began to lose their bearings. The rope had tangled. The water current shifted. The dark, still cave distorted their sense of time and space. What had started as a fun dive was now turning into a nightmare. They realized they were too deep. They had run out of air. Panic set in, but it was too late. The air in their tanks was gone. They had no way to get to the surface. They were trapped. In those final moments, the 4 men struggled, but the water was too cold, and their oxygen-deprived brains were too foggy. Time felt like it was moving in slow motion. Every breath became more desperate. But they couldn't find their way out. What's even worse is that in a situation like this, panic only makes things worse. Divers begin to act irrationally, losing their focus. They could have tried to go back, but they couldn't find the way. Instead, they found themselves spiraling deeper into confusion, disoriented and exhausted. They knew they couldn't survive long, but there was nothing they could do. By the time rescue divers were called, it was too late. For days, no one knew what had happened to the 4 young men. Search teams scoured the cave, but the search was slow, risky, and treacherous. The cave system's twists and turns made it difficult to navigate. And then, on the 3rd day, the rescuers finally found the bodies. They weren't scattered or torn apart by struggle. They weren't fighting or gasping for breath. They were huddled together. The 4 divers had stayed together in their final moments. It was as if they had accepted what was happening. There was no wild thrashing or desperate movements. They were still. They had run out of air, yes, but perhaps they didn't panic. They understood what had happened, and they chose to die together without fear. The way they were found shocked the rescue team. The stillness of their bodies, the way they were gathered in a corner of the cave, spoke volumes. The cave, with its cold grip, had taken them in a moment of complete silence. The rescue team brought their bodies out one by one, each recovery more painful than the last. They weren't just recovering the dead, they were uncovering the tragic truth about the dangers of cave diving. The shaft, despite its beauty, had proven to be a silent killer. For the families and friends left behind, the pain of the loss was immense. But it also raised questions. How could 4 experienced divers have gotten so lost in a place they knew well? The answer, though hard to swallow, was simple. No matter how much gear you have, no matter how much experience you've gained, if you go too deep for too long, you'll pay the price. They had relied on their training, their equipment, and their knowledge of the cave. But none of that was enough when things went wrong. The truth is, caves don't forgive mistakes. And in caves like the shaft, one wrong move can be fatal. Those 4 men went in with excitement and confidence, but they never came back. In their last moments, they never screamed. They never fought. They simply sank into the deep, quiet darkness, together. But this wasn't the end of the horror, because in the next story, they didn't fall slowly. They fell all at once. On April 28, 1995, the sun was shining over the small town of Cave Creek in New Zealand. It was the perfect day for an adventure. A group of 17 students and teachers from the local school were out on a field trip, ready to explore the natural wonders of the area. They had no idea that this would be the last trip they would ever take together. The group had been exploring the Paparoa National Park, a stunning stretch of wilderness known for its caves, cliffs, and deep gorges. The day was full of excitement. The teachers were leading the group, guiding them through the forest and toward a wooden platform that had been built, overlooking a massive chasm. The platform set on the edge of the cliff was meant to offer a breathtaking view of the valley below. It seemed like the perfect place to take a break and enjoy the scenery. At first, everything was calm. The students stood in groups, chatting and laughing. The teachers kept an eye on everyone, making sure no one got too close to the edge. The platform itself was sturdy-looking, worn from years of use, but still solid. It had been there for a while, and the students felt safe standing on it, admiring the view. But that feeling of security didn't last long. Without warning, the platform suddenly snapped. There was no time to react. 1 second, the students and teachers were standing on the platform, talking and laughing. The next, they were plummeting into the darkness, 40 meters to the ground below. The sound was deafening, a loud crack, followed by the horrific screams of those falling. The force of the drop was almost too much to comprehend. In the chaos, some tried to grab onto anything, but the platform and the people on it were already falling too fast. The crash was violent. The dust and debris clouded the air. When the ground finally stopped shaking, silence fell. Out of the 17 people on the platform, only 3 survived. 14 people died that day, including 8 students and 6 teachers. The surviving students, covered in cuts, bruises, and blood, had to crawl out of the wreckage, terrified and confused. They couldn't believe what had just happened. One moment they were laughing, the next they were surrounded by death and debris, their friends and teachers lying lifeless around them. The aftermath of the tragedy was shocking. New Zealand was stunned by the loss. Families were devastated. How could something so horrific happen in broad daylight? How could a group of young students and their teachers simply disappear in the blink of an eye? Investigations followed, and it became clear that the platform had been poorly constructed. It had been built years earlier by the New Zealand Department of Conservation, but it was never properly maintained. Over time, the wood had rotted, the metal bolts had weakened, and the structure was no longer safe. It wasn't just the lack of maintenance, it was also the fact that no one had checked the platform's safety for years. The authorities had failed to ensure the platform was stable, despite the number of people who visited it. The government and the Department of Conservation faced heavy criticism. There were accusations of negligence and mismanagement. The tragedy could have been prevented if the proper safety checks had been done. Families and survivors alike were left wondering, how could something so preventable lead to such a horrific loss? In the wake of the disaster, the platform was removed. It was clear that such negligence would never be tolerated again. The incident sparked a nationwide conversation about the importance of safety in public places, especially when it comes to structures meant to hold people. But for the families of the 14 people who died, the tragedy was not just about the lack of safety measures, it was about the lives lost in an instant. The friends, the teachers, the students, gone. The group had been laughing. They had been enjoying the day. They were there to experience something beautiful, something to remember. But in a single devastating moment, everything changed. 1 minute, they were alive. The next minute, they were gone. And for those who survived, the memory of the crash would haunt them forever. 1 moment, they were laughing. The next, they were gone. Caving might look like an exciting adventure, but as these brutal stories show, it's a deadly gamble hiding beneath the surface. Whether it's being sealed alive behind rock, running out of air in a watery maze, or falling without warning into a 40-meter drop, the underground world doesn't forgive mistakes. The terrifying fates of Eric Estably, the Mount Gambier divers, and the students at Cave Creek are a chilling reminder that once you go down, you might not come back up. If these true stories shook you, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications for more real-life caving horrors and survival tales. Which of these hit you the hardest? Would you ever dare to enter a cave after this? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear your take.